Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is Take 5 with Stephen Travers, and Stephen is with us today. We will not have Vincent Turner. Vincent's having some car issues, believe it or not. He's getting his car fixed and isn't able to be a part of today's show, unfortunately. So Logan Landers is going to fill in. Not only will he be our producer and engineer, he is also going to be a co-host with us. And today, guys, we're going to talk about all things NCAA playoffs and all things NFL playoffs. So it's playoffs, and more playoffs. If Jim Mora were to say playoffs, we probably would have the best show available. But before we get to playoff news, let's take one small second. Stephen, I'm going to get your opinion first. If you're Bill Belichick and Tom Brady is on the phone from the Las Vegas Raiders asking for a conversation with you in a formal matter. He doesn't want to talk about how ring number 4 doesn't fit the same way or how the offense is going. He wants to talk to you about maybe gainful employment. Do you take that call if you're Bill Belichick, who only a month ago took the University of North Carolina job? Stephen, first I'm going to go to you and just ask your overall opinion about where that kind of shakes down in terms of your opinion of it. Logan, I'll come to you next.
Well, most of what I have to say about this situation is based upon the fact that I recently watched the Tom Brady roast, which I think was on Netflix, but I saw various segments of it on YouTube. And Bill Belichick was one of the roasters, or he was one of the guests. He really didn't roast anybody. He got roasted, really. He got really roasted. Now, I think this was before he took the North Carolina job. So one of the big questions, or one of the big roasting points for Belichick in this event was, these guys joking about, no one's returning your call, Bill. How's it feel to be unemployed, and how Brady is obviously the reason you won. So Belichick took a lot of heat. I mean, it was joking and everything. And he just kind of smiled. There were a few times there when I think he was ready to tell Gronkowski to go run the mountain. But it certainly did not look from this event like Brady had any desire whatsoever to play football again. He's announcing. I mean, that being said, his Tom Brady and his competitive nature is just absolutely off the charts. I didn't think that he was going to go to Tampa Bay, but he did. And boy, did he ever prove himself in Tampa Bay. While Belichick and his Patriots in the time Brady left fell apart. Now, I'm going to give Belichick all the credit in the world for the building of the New England Patriots. He couldn't have done it without Tom Brady. I think he would have won some Super Bowls with another creditable quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers, or maybe even a guy like Jordan Love of the Packers, if he could have taken him and molded him. But he wouldn't have won 7 with anybody else other than Brady. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't think there is an answer to the question because nobody really knows. It's just an opinion. But if you watch that roast, they obviously love each other and there's a lot of respect for each other. But it didn't look like anybody was talking about Brady ever again playing for Belichick.
Well, not playing necessarily. So, Logan, if you understand my angle is just basically looking at it from an ownership of the Raiders. Tom Brady gave a specific X millions of dollars in order to join Mark Davis as a part of the ownership of the Raiders, and they need a coach. And here's a guy that is only 14 wins away from tying and then surpassing Don Shula in terms of the NFL victory leader from a head coaching standpoint. Bill took the college job. I think Bill is itching to get back to work. He doesn't care much about being on the Pat McAfee show, I think he really wants to get back to work and find another opportunity that would await him. Cleveland was short-lived. The Jets were even more short-lived. He obviously made his milk and gravy and everything that's a part of it with the Patriots. And does he want to get that 2 more years in so that he can be the best of all time and have that never be settled and retire under his own power? Your thoughts, Logan?
So I was doing some research on this, Harper, because whenever I initially heard about this, I was like, well, heck, what do you mean? He just got to Chapel Hill. His press conference was, like a month ago. What do you mean he's already going to leave? Or there's talks about him potentially leaving. So I looked it up, and Belichick does, according to FoxNews.com, has a $10 million buyout if he leaves before June 1st of this year in 2025. So if he does leave, there is that $10 million buyout there. So it is a possibility. I don't think it would be a good idea. I would say year one. I'd say, look, Bill, if you want to coach the first season in college, because you've already committed to the team you have here. There's already players who are already starting to come over. I saw that they had a transfer the other day that came over to the program. So I feel like that would do the players who are coming over to Chapel Hill, the coaching staff also a discredit. And honestly, it feels like maybe a slap in the face that say, hey, look, guys, I'm here, but I'm going to leave now. I feel like that would just be that morally, I think that would be wrong. But I think that if Bill does want to go back to the National Football League, at least coach one season in college, let the players know way ahead of time, say, hey, look, I'm only going to do this for a year, and then I will leave. That way, if you guys need to go look elsewhere, if there's other money involved in different schools, you're free to look. But I'm here for a season, and then I'm going back into the pros. I would be okay with that. I'd have a lot of respect for that if he was upfront about that. But I wouldn't be so sure if he would leave before even coaching one down with the North Carolina Tar Heels. So I think he'll stay in college for at least one season, if not more.
Well, it looks like the seat is barely even warm in his office where he's already been approached. So for you to find that there is a clause in the contract that would allow him to get out, he has an out. He can explain that, yeah, I was well aware of this, and I knew at one point or another there'd be some coaching changes and firings that I might be interested in being a replacement or consideration. I think it's a tough call either way. You're going to make somebody mad just even by entertaining the interview portion of the process. If you go through with that, what are you telling those kids that you just basically said, all right, do everything that you need to do. I need you to go to class. I need you to start working out real hard. And then I'm going to do everything I can to help you. Oh, by the way, I'm not. So it's a tough situation. Stephen, I think from a business perspective, am I wrong in saying that, just entertaining the actual interview or trying to go to an interview or a second interview in terms of being considered for that Raiders job?
Yeah, well, I had misread your question from the standpoint of Brady going to Belichick as a player, which didn't seem possible. It's much more likely, especially if Brady has an interest in the Las Vegas Raiders, for Belichick to go to a warm weather city and make a lot of money. And there's no question. I don't think there's any question. If you're 13 victories away from the all-time record, I don't care. There's always ego. Now, 13 victories, those are regular season wins. That's going to take 2 years. It's not likely that you're going to go to a team and win 13 regular season games. That's a 13-4 record in the first year and take care of it. So that's going to be 2 years. You win 8-9 games the first year. You win, another 8 or 9 games the second year. You have the record. So that's a 2-year project right there. And he's not getting younger. So, if he goes to Chapel Hill and he does that, and he does this sort of two-step, it's going to push it back the period of time that it's going to take for him to get this record. And I think I've mentioned before, Barry Bonds was retired from the San Francisco Giants, not at his own choosing. And he was one normal season away from 3,000 career hits. And 3,000 career hits is a big deal in baseball. Not that he's not, done everything else you can possibly do. But boy, you add 3,000 career hits to everything else he's done. I've always said he's the best player I've ever seen, and he might be the greatest baseball player who ever lived, regardless of, what you think about how he did it. But I'm just, these players care about these records, and these coaches care about these records.
Yeah, the 3,000 in terms of just switching lanes here for just a second, that's a no-brainer Hall of Fame number. Not that he needs additional ammunition to be able to get there. You just mentioned he's one of the greatest players of all time, period. Doesn't matter what era. So that in and of itself would just be icing on the cake in terms of just one other. And you stop to think just for a moment of how many intentional walks that he had. He probably would have been well above 3,000 had he had the opportunity over the past 4, 5, 6 years to actually face some live pitching instead of having to take 4 and end up walking to first base. Even if the bases were loaded, and I know they've done that maybe once or twice. When the bases are loaded and you intentionally walk Barry, well, that's the only guy pretty much in Major League Baseball that you would do that to.
You don't want to mess with Barry Lamar Bonds. I know that much. He was a threat, and also too, if he would have had another full season, he would have had. I'm sure he would have been the first player with 800 home runs in Major League history. So I mean, there's no doubt in my mind about that. He was only 38 or so away. So he very easily could have done it had things went a different route.
Could have gone outside of Haro O's record or whatever. There is a record also that they think it's not really known for sure what it is, but it's the record of the great catcher from the Negro Leagues who never played the big leagues. Name escapes me, but they think he hit 900 to 1,000. Of course, how many home runs did Barry Bonds hit in spring training games and in postseason games and all-star games? A lot of these games that were played in the Negro Leagues were exhibition games and not, official games. Sadaharo, I don't have it in front of me. I think he hit something like 850 home runs in regular season play between 1949 and 1970 or something like that. He had an amazing career.
We also got an answer here from Mr. Turner saying Josh Gibson's who we were looking for. That's Josh Gibson.
Yes, thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you, Vincent.
How about that?
Yeah.
Even when he's not here, he's here. He's here amongst us. He's hovering in the
he's next to the transmission and checking the brakes and looking up Josh Gibson's records.
And he's got that earbud going, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm going to fill you in. It's all about the history, guys. It's about the history. And speaking of history, Miami will be hosting here in the very first. There's always a first. And we've got the semifinal game number 1 tonight on ESPN at 7:30, featuring the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Stephen, we've talked about this at length, not you and I specifically, but on a previous episode here of 100 Yards of Football. And everyone's leaning a little bit towards Penn State. I'm not changing my mind. I'm just kind of quietly going, here's my issue with the Irish. If they have to pass, if Penn State puts an 8th player in the box and force the Irish to throw, I think the Irish are going to be less dominant. They won't be able to run quite like they want to. And that to me is suspect because they're very average in the passing game. Everything else about the Irish, boy, I was so impressed with the way they played against Georgia. I know that home game against Indiana was one that you could say, well, Indiana really didn't deserve to be there in the first place, and the Irish showed them why. But here it is an opponent that is a top 10 caliber team in Penn State, but let's flip everything around. Penn State is going against one of the best teams that they've played in quite a while, and they need to impress. So give us your first impressions regarding this particular game here, set in the Capital One Orange Bowl. Again, 7:30 here later this evening.
Well, there's an article in today's Wall Street Journal pointing out the historic aspect of the game with 2 black coaches facing off each other, and both of whom have certainly brushed off criticism. Franklin is 1-14 against top 10 teams. So that does not bode well for Penn State. If the game was in Arizona, I would favor Penn State. We talked about that. They seem to have a lock in games played in Arizona. I give the slight edge to Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. I think they play very strong defense. It's hard to really say about last week because they were up against a substitute quarterback, but definitely a talented quarterback. He was up against it, that kid, Gunner Stockton, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He was up against it in that there was a lot of pressure and it was thrust upon him late. But you have to hand it to Notre Dame. Defense wins championships. So at this point, I think I give Notre Dame a slight edge defensively because this is where the rubber hits the road, and maybe Penn State might come out a little tight. I don't know. But I think it could be just like the Georgia game. I don't see Penn State scoring an awful lot more or moving the ball an awful lot more than the Bulldogs did. Perhaps I'll be wrong, but I'm going to give a slight edge to Notre Dame. They've shown something to me. I did not expect this out of the Irish. Penn State has been strong for a number of years. Notre Dame has surprised me. They were, I saw them play last year in person in South Bend, and they just whomped on what was at that time a 6-0 USC team. And they held in that game, Caleb Williams to a terrible game. They intercepted something like 4 or 5 passes. There were also a couple of fumbles and fumble recoveries, just plays that they forced, and USC never got off the ground. And so this Irish team is better this year than they were last year. So I'm going to give them a slight edge.
Well, you brought up a lot of interesting points. And so, Logan, I'll go with you. Notre Dame, we talked previously in other shows that we've discussed the Penn State, the two-headed attack that they have on the running game, their quarterback, their tight end, their ability to get the ball down the field. They do they do a lot of things very well. In terms of Notre Dame's defense, do they have the size and the speed in order to be able to slow, especially the running game down for Penn State and force them to throw? I would be surprised if Penn State's, other than the tight end quarterback relationship, the outside receivers, albeit good, they don't have the same power, in my opinion, as what, let's say, Texas or Ohio State has in terms of being a threat. So, Logan, give me your thoughts on what Stephen was saying. And then, obviously, my question is, what does Notre Dame's defense need to do?
So, with Notre Dame, in terms of just the size question, Harper, I think that I think they're going to be solid, but I don't think they're going to be as dominant as we've seen in the past 2 weeks in college football playoff action, where they held Trevor Etienne to just, I believe, 38 yards, and against Indiana held their top running back to, I believe, 37. So they're not going to be able to do that, I don't believe, like you said, against the two-headed monster out there at Penn State. But I think that if you can limit that duo to maybe under 100, I think that would definitely weigh in your favor. We saw what Penn State, going back to them now, we saw what they did against Ashton Genty, held him to, I believe, 103 yards, but it took him 30 carries. It took him pretty much the whole game to get there. It wasn't like he was rattling them off, left and right like we're used to seeing. He had to fight for those yards. So I think that if Notre Dame can limit the running attack to less than 100, very early 100, 105, if they can just do that, I think that would be enough. But I don't know if they can do that. It's going to be a tough task, though, coming up later on tonight.
Stephen, I was impressed with Notre Dame's defense, the speed that they had, especially with the front seven. Occasionally you bring a linebacker from the outside, some guy that is a little bit smaller, but it wreaked of havoc for the Georgia offensive line to where they had to switch tackles at halftime. in order to compensate for the inability to protect their quarterback. Do you think Penn State will have to worry about something? Well, they're going to worry about it, don't get me wrong, but do they have the guys up front to be able to at least slow it down so Aller can go downfield with Warren or maybe on the outside? What are your feelings regarding the Notre Dame pressure and whether or not they got to bring a fourth, fifth, or even a sixth player?
Well, I agree with Logan, and I think what he is getting at is containment. So Penn State, okay, they may have two running backs who both gain 100 yards, but do they gain 180 yards? And do they score touchdowns? And then getting back to that game I saw last year in South Bend, USC actually moved the ball that day, but there were interceptions and there were turnovers. So this could be the big factor. If they can get some turnovers, get a little bit of Irish luck, then that might be the factor that favors Notre Dame.
Here's an interesting statistic that I read, that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish have won their last 6 games that have been played in an NFL stadium. Obviously, the Hard Rock is where the Miami Dolphins play, and Notre Dame would be, in most opinions, at home at another NFL stadium. However, they're 0-2 in Hard Rock. So previous time there, you take what you want. But there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. Your final thoughts on this game, Logan, in terms of just, I'm excited for it to be here. I can't wait to watch what's going to happen. But if you were to kind of give a small little bird's eye of what you expect to take place, what would that be?
So I expect, for me, I think that, we've talked about the good running game, the defense, but for me, a factor we haven't really spoke much about is who's going to be the better quarterback. Riley Leonard last week against Georgia, we saw he didn't put up a passing clinic, right? He was held under 100 yards through the air. And meanwhile, when you look at how Drew Aller did against Boise State, granted, it wasn't mind-boggling, but it was consistent, right? 13 of 25, 120 some odd yards, and 3 touchdowns. So if you're not going to throw the ball for a large chunk like that, at least be accurate, be concise, and be a game changer like that. So for me, I think the quarterback play for Penn State to go along, like we've already said, with the good defense, the running backs. But I think that personally, I believe that Drew Aller is going to be the better quarterback than we've seen from Riley Leonard in this upcoming game. And like I said, Riley is a good quarterback, but I think right now Drew's just got the hot hand and is just doing a little bit better in terms of his team. And also, they got Tyler Ward. So when you've got the best tight end in the country, that always helps out your offense as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Riley Leonard, with his legs, hasn't had to throw a heck of a lot because he and Love have done a fantastic job of being the 1-2 punch to Irish have run for over 3,000 yards throughout the course of the season, but so has Penn State. So I think the running game, they're fairly equal with one another. Passing game, I give the nod to Penn State. I think that they've got a better passing game. The numbers prove that. They've thrown for over 3,000 yards, where the Irish have thrown for a little more than 2,000. So in terms of who's better, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be who's better tonight. So, Stephen, my question to you is, who do you think between these two teams has what it takes, offense, defense, special teams, kickers especially? What is your impression about, who's going to come away with the trophy here tonight at the Orange Bowl?
I think Notre Dame, I'm going to give them a little bit of an edge. It isn't necessarily because they're bigger or more talented than Penn State. I think it's going to be a defensive struggle, and there's going to be some big plays that are going to be made that are going to determine this game in, let's say, a 27-20 type of game, not a super high scoring game by today's standards. That being said, it's I would maybe favor Notre Dame by a point. It's basically a toss-up. I think either team. I've been impressed with the Irish to beat Georgia, to beat a Southeastern Conference team is a big, big deal. And maybe this SEC is not quite as good as they used to be now that Nick Saban is not there anymore. But hey, they're the SEC, and to beat Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs was a huge, big deal for the Fighting Irish. And one of my best friends went to Notre Dame, so I guess I've got to I've got to have some rooting interest in that regard. But I really do. I really do think Notre Dame will hold up well. I don't think they're going to get blown out by Penn State. That's my feeling.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned earlier that Franklin is 1-14 against top 10 teams, and then you have Marcus Freeman, who's this is all new for him, but he does have the Echoes along with him and the fight song and the people that are going to be there. By the way, the attendance is presumed. The sellout there is a little bit more than 65,000, which is about half, a little bit more than half of what Penn State would normally have for a home game. So they will be playing in front of a small crowd here today of only about 68,000 people. But again, the matchup, Notre Dame favored by 1. The Irish are 13-1. They're going against the 13-2 Nittany Lions from Penn State. So that'll be the first of the 2 college football playoff games. The second is the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. And tomorrow night, it'll feature Ohio State and Texas. And so, Stephen, I'll start with you. I don't know if there's a Matthew McConaughey sighting, already.
All right.
But I'm sure, especially for this one, if the cameras are rolling, he'll be nearby. But I was also impressed with some of the other alumni that show up for their respective teams, and Ohio State certainly has a blue chip list of alumni. So I'm not sure if the fans will be on the game as much as on the sidelines and who's in attendance and all of that. But give me your first impressions regarding this one.
This is a heavyweight championship bout between 2 great teams and 2 great programs. And as the so-called resident historian, I have a lot to say about that. Reminds me of a Sports Illustrated cover story in 1971 when unbeaten Oklahoma went up against unbeaten Nebraska, Johnny Rodgers. And it said, unstoppable object goes up against an immovable impenetrable object, something along those lines. And that's what I'm seeing here. We know that we have 2 teams that lost their conference championship games, while Georgia won their conference championship game, and they're no longer here. So this gets back to my theory last week that we have a new paradigm in collegiate football, and it's a moneyball paradigm in which you build a team for a national championship playoff to get it all the way to that 17th game and win it. So that's the question. Which team is built for that? I think Ohio State, on the face of it, I think Ohio State looks to be the team that is built for that. Their performance against Oregon last week was, as Vincent said, monumental. And considering everything, one of the best games really I've ever seen a team play in college, which is saying a lot. And I've certainly seen some great ones. Texas, on the other hand, really did everything in their power to give away their game against the Arizona State Sun Devils, who, in theory, at least other than Cam Skattebo, really shouldn't have been on the same field with Texas. Next factor, the game is at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, where I saw a game a few years back. It's a beautiful stadium in Arlington, and it's going to be more, I would say it would be a Texas home game, but I've been to many Rose Bowl games against Ohio State and Michigan and Texas, in which theoretically USC should have a home field advantage, and they really didn't. The place was 50-50. So my guess is that Texas money is going to buy up a lot of these, or that Ohio State fan base is going to travel and they're going to be at this game. Next, you have this strange dynamic in which these 2 great teams, and I think there's no question that it makes sense that the winner of this game should be the favorite to win the national championship. against either Notre Dame or Penn State. But is there a letdown? Is there looking forward to the last game? You play so many games, and this is what their 16th out of what they're hoping to be a 17 game really pro schedule. So then it comes down to the performance of Quinn Ewers, who is all eyeballs are on him, first round draft pick. How much money is going to be offered to him to play professional football next year? He's going to want to put his best foot forward. And speaking of best feet forward, Bert Auburn, the field goal kicker for UT, who is breathing a big sigh of relief that his team somehow pulled out a game in which he missed not really chip shots, but field goals he should have made in conditions that were good. So if it comes down to him again, well, do they go to him, from the 35-yard line, or do they hope that Ewers can make a little 4-yard pass? Those are, and Sarkisian is a bit of a gambler too. So my guess is Sarkisian. He's a Pete Carroll acolyte. Carroll always liked to go for it on fourth down. I'm going to give a slight edge to Ohio State because they might just be, but as big as fat and as strong as they are, Texas is too. I talked to my friend Kevin McCormick, who really has an eye for interior line. And he said, yeah, Ohio State's big, but no bigger than Texas. So like I say, it's a heavyweight championship bout.
Yeah, there's no doubt. One of those bouts, Logan, if you don't mind me saying so, Jahdae Barron, who is a first-team All-American, and he won the Thorpe Award as the nation's top defensive back. He draws the assignment of taking care of that 6'3" freshman Jeremiah Smith, who is a second-team All-American with 70 catches, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns. That will be one of the battles within the battle that I'll be watching. I know that you have been not only amazed and surprised at Jeremiah Smith's meteoric rise into stardom. So give us your impression, at least on that matchup in the passing game that Ohio State has and that they'll be bringing into this game.
I'll keep it simple, Harper. Jeremiah Smith said, no one can guard me. Well, so far no one has. Let's see if you've got one game ahead of you. You might have two. So let's see if Texas is up for the task. But, yeah, I mean, he's obviously super impressive, and that's going to be a big factor. If Texas can either A, shut him down, or B, contain him to as much as they can. But also, let's not forget that Ohio State has just a just tremendous crop of wide receiving talent on their team. I mean, it's just offensive weapons. I mean, when you put up 40 points in back-to-back college football playoff games against Tennessee and then also against Oregon, who was the top team in the nation, you're doing something right. You have a really talented team that can score points whenever you need them to. Like you said, with Jeremiah Smith obviously leading the charge, but Emeka Ibuki, a guy who coming into the season, a lot of people said was going to be maybe that number one before Smith came over and really kind of stole the spotlight from him. But he's a great threat as well. He had 70 catches this year. Carnell Tate, their third top receiver, he's got 43 catches. So those three guys alone have close to 200 catches, if not more, on the season. So yes, Jeremiah Smith gets all the media love and hype, but really just the wide receiving room at Ohio State is phenomenal. To go along, like I said, with a solid running game and the emergence we've seen here lately of Will Howard, who's looked pretty much spotless in these playoffs.
Yeah, Will is certainly boosting his NFL draft stock every time that he drops back and completes another pass to one of these great receivers that he has all over the place. Stephen, the line is 6. I'm not asking you to be a betting man right now, but what would the number need to be in order for you to say, I'm thinking I need to maybe switch sides here? Is there a specific point differential? Because I'm thinking you're just shy of a touchdown after a blowout first half against Oregon. And really just basically they're running out the clock in the second half. Each school scored a touchdown, but I thought that, in my opinion, Ohio State was just gliding. Hey, you're not going to score on us, but we're not going to embarrass you any further. We could probably score 70 points, but we're just going to keep it where it is right now in the 40s. Am I out with that at all? I mean, is that a ridiculous statement that makes no sense at all?
I would say 10 to 14 points. Maybe if you gave me that, I might take the Longhorns on the under, but still maybe lose the game. I don't really look at it. The only thing I care about is winning the game or losing the game. And, getting back to history, these two teams played in a pivotal and very historic year, 2005. And Texas went into the Big House, the Horseshoe, in 2005 with Vince Young, and they trailed in the fourth quarter, and Young led the Longhorns back late for, I believe it was a 17-13 victory, if my facts are correct. Maybe it was 20-17. It was a closely held game, and it was a game that Texas won and kept their undefeated season going in a year in which they eventually won the national championship. So that was a game I always remembered, watching those two teams and those two uniforms and those colors, sort of the scarlet and gray against the burnt orange of Texas. It's going to be a spectacle. And again, this is just incredible for college football, that you're a college football fan and you're getting to see all these fantastic programs. I mean, the resurgence of Notre Dame, Notre Dame being back in the hunt for their fan base. And, they're playing in Florida, but, road games are home games for them because their fan base is all across America. A lot of Catholics in Florida. And so any place they go, that was how they built their program, playing games in large Catholic cities. But getting back to Ohio State and Texas doesn't get any better than that. I mean, this was a period of time that was once ceded to the National Football League, because by this point in the season, the championship game was played or almost was played, maybe this weekend. And then it's done. And then you don't really hear about the colleges. The pros just take up all the oxygen. So collegiate football is now right there with professional football in terms of getting just as much excitement. And it doesn't get any better than this, to see these two fan bases. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see McConaughey. I'd like to see McConaughey and Woody Harrelson be on the sidelines. Maybe Woody can go over to the Ohio State side, and they can argue with each other like they did in the True Detective, from across.
Yeah. or in the commercial that they've got now where McConaughey's in the rain and Woody's over there underneath the tarp to keep him clean. You mentioned history, Stephen. All of these schools have won national titles. You got to go back a few years for Notre Dame and Penn State. 86, 88 were the two respective years that Penn State Notre Dame wins a national championship. A little more recently for both Texas and for Ohio State in the 2000s. But you mentioned history. Now, Georgia has won recently. Oregon has not. Clemson has won a couple of times, and they've been eliminated. Tennessee won one in the mid-'90s, but I don't want that to have to be a prerequisite. Okay, I like Boise being in it. I want a team that wins 11, 12 games throughout the course of the year, like Indiana, to get a chance to play. So the little bit of mix, I would imagine. If you're hot for a year, terrific. But if you've been worth your weight in gold in terms of collegiate prowess and history, I can't think of another set of schools that could do a better job of representing right now.
Yeah, and just looking at regions, South, Midwest, South, Southwest, Far West, Desert West, Midwest, Midwest, Deep South. Mountain West, okay, like you say, the Mountain West has been represented in this playoff, and another Texas team, and then Pennsylvania, which is right. Pennsylvania is just sort of in between the East Coast and the Big Ten and the Midwest. It's the Erie, Pennsylvania, the Erie Canal, and that whole area that I was just traveling in just a month or so ago. So that's a really, I think, I don't think it was planned, but it really is a nice representation of the entire United States of America. The only teams that we don't have are the University of Hawaii and the University of Alaska. But we've got all the major, we've got, the South and the Southwest, the Far West and the Mountain West and the Desert West. Boy, everybody's there. The Midwest, it's a nice party.
Well, no disrespect to Alabama or Florida State, Miami, some of the other schools that have won in the recent past or even in the distant past. It's just a very interesting combination, and we'll get to see more of it. We're a little bit of yesterday in the history from back when all of us had fewer gray hairs, along with the updated new version of somebody, hey, we're here to play, and let us show you why. So the representation, obviously, there are some schools that go, we should have been there. Well, win one more game or lose one less game, and we're not having that debate. So the playoff again tonight, it is Notre Dame and Penn State, and that will be the first game of the two remaining semifinal games. And then tomorrow night, you've got the Ohio State Buckeyes and Texas Longhorns. So that's a look at our college football playoff, and now the NFL. And Stephen, obviously, the Super Bowl trophy is what this country is all about. There are people that are actually vying for having the Monday after the Super Bowl be a national holiday so that they can recover from a night of having a great celebration and enjoying the Super Bowl itself. We start with the bye week for Kansas City and Detroit. I think Detroit needs it a little bit more than Kansas City, but they both earned it. And before we get into the first game between Houston and Chargers, give me, first of all, your thoughts about the playoff. There's a few teams that I didn't expect to be here, Washington being one of them. I didn't think the Chargers would be there, and definitely not the Broncos. But then you've also got Minnesota, who wins, 14 games, and they're a fifth seed. So there's some things that kind of don't make sense. But then again, let's just start playing, and it'll all wash itself out throughout the course of the playoff series here in late January and February.
Well, right off the top, we've got the question of where the Rams and the Minnesota Vikings are going to play. Because obviously there are incredible fires in Los Angeles. And even though SoFi Stadium is built low to the ground, or actually below ground because it's in the flight path of LAX, there's going to be smoke at that stadium. It's has a slightly open roof. I don't know if they're capable of completely closing the roof. If they can completely close the roof, then I think the game should be played in Los Angeles. If they test it out and they're just smelling a lot of smoke and it's just going to be a smoky situation, because Inglewood is not far away from Pacific Palisades, and also there's a fire in the Hollywood Hills, which is not far away. So no matter how you slice it, it's a smoky and bad situation, not to mention traffic situations too. And the fact that undoubtedly a lot of the Rams fan base and playoff ticket buying base lives in those places, because they're wealthy, affluent places where people can afford season tickets and playoff tickets. So again, I like to talk about history. So when I see the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams, I go back to my childhood, because I don't know how many times those two teams played, and more often than not, the Vikings would get the edge on the Rams. Not every single time. But there were a lot of cold games played in Bloomington, Minnesota, between Rams teams coached by George Allen and Tommy Prothro, against Minnesota Viking teams coached by Bud Grant, in which the weather played a difference. So the weathers should not play a difference unless the smoke plays a difference. If they go to Glendale, then obviously they'll be playing indoors in a warm weather location. Either way, the Vikings have an outstanding team. They gave the Detroit Lions everything that they could, and then forced a very difficult game against the Lions last Sunday and Jared Goff. And the Lions really have pulled off an incredible season. And with Kansas City losing their last game, the Lions and the Chiefs have the two best regular season records in football. So if those two teams play in a Super Bowl, you have a matchup for the ages of two teams with the same record and really the two best quarterbacks in pro football, or at least two of the three best. So that's the Minnesota Los Angeles game.
Yeah, in terms of the decision yet, I just found out, a friend of mine texted me that the Los Angeles Lakers, who are supposed to play tonight, their game has been postponed, meaning that the smoke and obviously the other emergency situation there with the forest fires. I'm looking at a live ESPN. The NFL is still monitoring whether or not the game right now, it's going to remain in Los Angeles. That's what I'm seeing from ESPN as we speak. So no final decision on that. But Logan, in terms of just the safety of the game, all of that is a major concern. But if the game is going to be played, which the league wants, they want to put these teams on the field. And even though you have the advantage of it being a Monday night game, and it'll be the last of the playoff games for this week, the wild card weekend, certainly the importance of having a team that's 14-3 be a fifth seed and have to go on the road for their first game. No rest for the weary. Too bad they lost that game against Detroit. Otherwise, they would be hosting the game, and then Detroit would be here. But either way, the great reward from the seeding is that, guess what? I don't care how good your record is. You're going to have to play a road playoff game unless you win your division.
Yeah, and like you said, just insane what's going on right now in the state of California and all the wildfires and whatnot. And like you said, they're going to have to figure out a decision here very quickly, because like I said, I get it's on Monday, but we're filming this right now on a Thursday. So you've got to get that figured out for not just for the fans, obviously, who are going, but for the travel, for the hotel, for so many other just intricacies that that we could spend a whole show talking about. But they're going to have to get that figured out, I think. But like you said, it was a tough game, right? Between Minnesota, between the Lions, and somehow, I don't know how they keep doing it, Harper, but the Lions just keep on winning. Half their roster is going to be just like us, watching the game on the couch, it feels like. They've had injuries after injuries after injuries, so on and so forth. But they've just continued to win. But that's going to be a good matchup, though. Obviously, the Monday night matchup with Los Angeles and with Minnesota. Sam Darnold, who's had talk about a comeback, right? Comeback player of the year, more than likely, if I had to guess. Just with the season he's had, when the season kicked off, no one even thought that he was even going to be a starter, right? They all assumed it was going to be J.J. McCarthy, who they had drafted out of Michigan, but unfortunately he got hurt, so they had I guess at this point, a veteran now in Darnold. They said, all right, it's your time to shine, and my God, he's done great. He's done a great job for Minnesota. I think so, and for Los Angeles, look, they have a really talented roster as well, led by Matt Stafford. We know a guy who's won a championship with the team, a veteran, just a good player overall, right? Always can get you yards, get you touchdowns if you need to. We know obviously the insane talent they have on the wide receiving room with Nakua, with Kupp. And then, of course, their defense, which I thought, and a lot of people thought, was going to take kind of a step back, right, with Aaron Donald, who'd retired. I mean, the way that they've been able to get players to bring them in, whether it be through draft, through free agency, I mean, their defense has really stood up, since Donald's retirement. And I was surprised by that. I thought it would definitely take a step back, but they've still looked sharp, and that's why they are a number 4 seed, and that's why they look so solid. But I think this is going to be, like I said, it's a Monday night game. All eyes going to be on it, wherever the heck it's going to get played at. It's going to be a really solid performance for both teams there.
Yeah, they started out 1-5.
Yeah, that's true.
1-4. Excuse, 1-4. The Rams did. They lose to the Lions an opening weekend, and then the Cardinals, the Bears, and then the Packers. And since then, not too bad, right? They had a 5-game winning streak that was upset there that last game of the season against the Seahawks. But other than that, I think a team that you would probably have given up on by the halfway point of the season. They look okay, but no. They've turned a lot of things around, and obviously getting to host the game, whether or not they actually do. So, any final thoughts, Stevens, regarding how well Stafford needs to play? The Rams are not as beat up as the Lions, but they certainly have had their share of injuries. Not quite 100%. But they're there. But what surprised me between these two teams is how well Minnesota's defense has played this year.
Yeah. Well, I think you're looking at 2 veteran quarterbacks going up against each other. And I am a Sam Darnold fan, having followed him for many, many years. And I've always believed that given the right set of circumstances, he can succeed in the National Football League, and he is. So I'm going to give him the edge. I think he is going to come on strong. Now, another aspect of this, and we've talked about this at the college level, where we've seen the teams with buys not really getting an edge. And it's, as you've mentioned, Harper, sometimes that team that plays carries it forward, and the team that sits and has an extra week gets a little bit rusty. So that possibly could play out as this playoff series advances. We have several teams who have had really good years, and they still have to play that first game. Looking at Minnesota, looking at Philadelphia, Green Bay as well, Buffalo, several teams that have had strong seasons and wanted to get that bye. They're not going to get it, but maybe they're going to come out flaming, out of this week and into next week.
Well, let's go in reverse order here, if you don't mind. So we've attached our thoughts and concerns regarding the last, in terms of the order of playoff games, the one that's on Monday night. A late Sunday game is 2 teams that earlier in the year had no idea that they would be there. What a surprise that Gomer Pyle would have for both Tampa, who's won the division, but basically we're told by the press and everybody else, Atlanta's going to win it this year. Well, Atlanta ends up folding a tent and unable to win a couple of games that they probably needed to and obviously should have in the middle of the season. And so they forfeit the division to Tampa, who, oddly enough, Baker Mayfield had a great season. The numbers were strong, and everything seems to be going in Tampa's way, except for the fact that the Commanders had no reason for being here. And Logan, let's get your first impressions on a game between a team that was picking second in the draft, and now here we are looking at a Commanders club that, for all intents and purposes, 12-5 is a great place to be in that 1-year turnaround.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And the key for me in this one is just going to be the quarterback battles, right? It's going to be Baker Mayfield. It's going to be Jaden Daniels. For Baker, look, he's been around the league. He's been in playoff games. He's had a phenomenal season, right, when a lot of people kind of cast him off. A guy who had bounced around for a couple of years, right, went to Los Angeles with the Rams, went to Carolina, for God's sake, and people forgot he was even in the league at some point. But since he's moved over to Tampa, he's had a really good career resurgence, and I'm glad to see. And He, much to the dismay of the Atlanta Falcons and the rest of their fans, helped lead them to a first-place finish at the end of the year and propel them win the NFC South. Of course, Mike Evans coming back is big, right? We know he got his 1,000 receiving yards to join a very exclusive club there with Jerry Rice. So much love to that. But I think that it's going to be an interesting matchup because, I mean, you got Washington, coached by Dan Quinn, of course, a guy who's, you know, he knows the playoffs. He's been there a time or two, right? And he's got a young quarterback who hasn't been in this spot in the NFL before. So you've got to obviously calm his nerves, right? Because look, the playoffs are a whole lot different than the regular season. So you've got to just say, hey, just treat it one play at a time, right? One pass at a time, and just trust in your gut and your instinct like we've done all season with you. And that's why Washington has had such a quick turnaround. Like you said, Arbor, they were picking number 2 in the draft just a few months ago, and now here they are going to be in a playoff game as number 6. So that's just how well the credit to the coaching staff and the general manager for finding the right talent, and for the coaching staff for training them up and putting them in the right positions, and obviously for the players for executing. But for me, this is going to be a good matchup. I think I might go with I guess you could say the slight upset in this one. I think that Washington will pull this out and rank this to 6th seed. I think that they'll take it. I just think that if they can get red hot, they could be a team that could play some spoilers here in this playoffs, because Jaden Daniels, I've been very impressed by that young man, a guy who could very well win the Rookie of the Year. It'd probably be between him and Brock Bowers for my 2 bets, but a guy who, if he can get red hot, it's going to be tough for defenses to stop him like we've seen pretty much all season long. Well,
here's before I go to Steven, just following up with Jaden Daniels, let me look up his stats real quick. 3,500 yards, which is a little averagey in the area of, passing yards. 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He was sacked 47 times. That's kind of the 25 I'm impressed with. The 9 is great. Only 9 picks. The sack ratio is a little high, but he ends up being the leading rusher for the team, 891 yards. And Brian Robinson, God bless him, he had just a yard shy of 800. They rushed for 2,600 yards. That, to me, is the biggest difference maker, is whether you cover your guys defensively. If I'm Tampa and I'm looking at my defensive scheme and I've got everybody and they're all covered, there's no place for it to throw. I've got to watch for these legs now. Jaden Daniels, a guy that can get the first down. When the Falcons played him just a couple of weeks ago, I was just shocked at how easily he escaped the pocket and ran to the point where he got out of bounds and nobody even touches him. It's just amazing. So give me one quick impression regarding Jaden Daniels and what you got to do to stop him if you're Tampa Bay's defense.
I think I would say you keep a spy on him, right? We talked about it in college a couple weeks ago. With a couple of guys there, but I think you have to. Obviously, he's the leading rusher, so he's kind of like Lamar Jackson in a sense, and I know we'll get to him in a minute, is that you always have to watch out for him, because if there's nothing open in the passing game, he can run with his legs, and he can do so very well. So always just keep a guy lurking, because you never know when he'll take off.
Steven, do you think that Washington has time to get with the Commissioner Roger Goodell and worry about he's got the Ram game and where that's going to be played? Well, will he be okay with allowing Washington to have 13 or 14 guys on the field in order to spy and keep Jaden Daniels in the pocket?
I assume that's a facetious question.
You think? Yeah.
Regarding Roger Goodell, I don't know what goes through his mind. So I'm going to speaking of that roast that I watched recently with Tom Brady, Roger Goodell got roasted pretty good that night, even though he was not there. In fact, the fact that he wasn't there was one of the biggest reasons he was getting roasted. This is a game between 2 teams I've not really followed, and it just seems like they just kind of snuck up on everybody while you're looking at Green Bay and the Vikings. And I'm following the Rams because they're in the West. But I don't know. I would probably favor Mayfield for the same reason I favor Darnold. Just looking at a veteran quarterback experience, guy trying to really get to the dance, really do something in his career that is the ultimate, which is to get to and win a Super Bowl. And, there's only so many years that you have to do it. And this is an opportunity for Mayfield. So he's playing at home. I'm going to give them a little bit of an edge.
Well put. I can't disagree with you. Interesting points. And obviously, this is the 8 o'clock game on Sunday, a little bit earlier in the afternoon with a 4:30 start. This is on Fox. It'll be Philadelphia against Green Bay. So, Stephen, we'll start with you on this one. This could be, obviously, it's the battle of the only teams in the league that wear green, but 11-6 versus 14-3. The Packers proved to me last year that they are for real. They can win on the road in the playoffs, or at least give you one heck of a game. What are your thoughts here about this one?
Well, the first thing I think about here is that we are experiencing, aside from fires in California, we are experiencing extreme cold weather in this part of the country. And now, obviously, Green Bay is used to playing in the cold, and both teams are used to playing in the cold. But it's a very, so that's a factor. Getting back to, again, probably the reason I'm here is because I know history. This is the 1961 NFL championship game between the Green Bay Packers of Vince Lombardi and the Philadelphia Eagles. And they were coached by a famous quarterback. Gosh darn. Logan, what was that guy? He was a Hall of Fame quarterback who had become
Norm Van Brocklin?
Norm Van Brocklin, yes. So that was a game that Lombardi lost and said, we're never going to lose a title game again, and he never did. But anyway, that's just going back a long time. These are tremendous old rivals, that have been playing each other for years, and their fan bases have been sniping at each other for years. The Eagles have a lot of speed and athleticism, but so does Green Bay with Jordan Love, who's impressed me greatly when I've seen him. He appears to me to be right on the edge of being at where maybe in a year or so he'll be where Josh Allen and Jared Goff are. So I am going to go with a slight upset on the road with Green Bay in this game.
Well, Logan, when you think about Chuck Bednarik or Tommy Brookshire or a coach that was in Atlanta when I played here, Jim Gummy Carr, going back to the 1960 champion Philadelphia Eagle team, I think Stephen is being facetious to us by saying that the only sniping going on between those two fan bases, that's Philly. Philly's the only one that's doing any sniping, and they're doing a lot of it because that's what their fans do. Green Bay and Minnesota, the nicest fans you'd ever want to. Oh, come on, have a bratwurst with us, and enjoy some cold beer. You're going to root for the Eagles today. Oh, well, bless your heart. Something like that. So it'd be great if we were a fan and if we wore the wrong color jersey in Philadelphia, which was where this game will be at the Link. It'd be very interesting. But Logan, your thoughts here about Green Bay and the Eagles?
Yeah, this is going to be a heavyweight matchup, to steal a term that was used by Steven a while back in the show. And this is going to be for the running backs I'm looking forward to. I mean, Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, two guys who they left their teams that they were known for years, obviously with Jacobs with the Raiders and Saquon, who was with the Giants for all those seasons, and moved on to greener pastures, literally and figuratively, in their uniforms. But I think that they've both been huge moves on both teams, and they've paid off dividends. When you look, we'll just start with Green Bay, right? Obviously, Jordan Love, he's had a solid year of 25 touchdowns, over 3,000 plus yards, 11 INTs. He's only sacked 14 times also. So a lot of credit to his O-line for keeping him upright throughout the year. But Jacobs has been phenomenal. 1,300 plus rushing yards. He averages 4.4 yards per carry, and he gets 15 touchdowns on the ground. we look at Saquon, we know that, look, there's that whole talk about can he beat the record and whatnot. And we know he sat out last week, so he didn't, but he still had a very good year. 2,005 yards in terms of rushing, 5.8 average per carry, which is just through the roof. And he had 13 touchdowns. And then Jalen Hurts, got to throw him in there because he had 14 rushing touchdowns. So both of these teams can just score points, and they do. Now, I do know that Green Bay is going to be without one of their top receivers in Christian Watson. I know he has, I believe, a knee injury that is lingering him. So that is something to watch out for. And for Philadelphia, I mean, the team that, remember last year going into the end of the season, they had fallen off a cliff pretty much. They had struggled to end the year. There were talks about, oh man, what are we doing here? Like, do we need to blow the team up? And they, they stuck their head down. They got through that, and credit to Jalen Hurts and the rest of the team for just kind of getting all that from the wayside and moving forward. And look, they're off to a 14-3 year. They've only lost one game at home, which is where, like you said, Harper, this can be played at. So they've got obviously the Philly fans are they're something, all right. They're a raucous bunch, and especially come playoff time, no matter what sport it is, whether it's baseball, whether it's hockey, whether it's basketball, it seems like the fans in Philadelphia show up just even more somehow during the playoffs. So that's going to be something to watch. So I think for this one, I think Green Bay will give them a good run for their money, but I think in the end, I'll give the slight edge to Philadelphia moving forward.
Okay, well, the spread on this one, if I'm not mistaken, it's 4.5 is where the line is right now. And the interesting thing for me, both teams can get to the quarterback. 41 sacks for the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles, for Philadelphia, they had 41. The Packers had 45. So both teams are really good at being able to create pressure, and they'll see which quarterback. Both of them are a little bit dinged up. You've got Jalen Hurts, who's coming back from concussion protocol. So let's see what he's like if he has to hit the ground or if his helmet does, whether or not he's able to stay in the ball game. And then because of his elbow and getting hit while he was released, Jordan Love's elbow is under tight scrutiny right now. He's practiced, but he has been limited. So we'll see how that goes. But that's a look at the NFC side. The first of our AFC games happens to be the last of the three of the games that they play. The first one on Sunday, Buffalo ends up hosting Denver. This is a 1:00 kick. It'll be on CBS. And Stephen, let's start with you. Did you expect the Denver Broncos at the beginning of the year to be a team that we were going to be talking about here in early January regarding a playoff berth and a visit to Buffalo?
Well, I'll get to that game in a second. I just want to make two comments about the Green Bay Philadelphia. One, Jalen Hurts is another quarterback I saw personally when he made his first start at the University of Alabama against the Trojans in 2016 in Dallas. And if you ever want to see a movie about fans, and this is regarding the Philadelphia Eagles, is a movie called Big Fan starring Patton Oswalt, who plays a New York Giants fan, and he dolls himself up in Eagles colors and goes into a sports bar in Philadelphia and then creates havoc in that sports bar. So that's a great story about the fan base in the East Coast and in Philadelphia. Denver, I wasn't sure what to make of the AFC West at the start of this season. Kansas City obviously won 14 games, and yet a lot of those games were close games. They're at one point, I don't know if they finished the season this way, but they were the best one-loss team in the history of the league with the smallest differential of wins. Denver is a team that, they play in a mile-high altitude, and I think that gives them a little bit of advantage when they play at home. I've played in high altitude. Buffalo is a club that I also saw in person with Josh Allen playing in a blizzard on December 1st of last year. And they're going to be playing in a blizzard again. Denver, of course, just like Green Bay, is a team that's used to cold weather, but this is extreme cold weather. And I think it's going to be a lot colder and icier than it was the day I was there when the snow was coming down, but it was flaky. And what I saw that day with Buffalo was a team that really knew how to play in those conditions. They were making their cuts. I think they must have a really good field or a really good field maintenance crew. Either way, that field holds up very nicely. And I think Buffalo has got a lot of speed and they've got a lot of firepower with Allen. And I think they're going to be a real team to look for. I'm looking for Buffalo to go all the way in the AFC. This is their first shot out of the box as far as this playoff is concerned. Again, they're not getting the bye like Kansas City, but I think they're going to go up against Kansas City. Last year they came within, the last minute of the game of beating the Chiefs. I think this is Buffalo's year in the AFC, and I think they're going to win this game.
Well, then, obviously, Logan, the running game is going to be a key. It may not be the prettiest game you've ever seen, but you know what? We're built for this. I agree with Steven in terms of the team, the way that they're constructed is really designed to be a home January, good enough on defense to stop you, but consistent enough on offense to keep getting first downs, run the clock on. We can win by 1, we can win by 40. Either way, that's what we're built for. Is this just another Sean McDermott year where we have just a team that is designed and specifically built to win at home and then be able to go to Kansas City and try to pull an upset against the Chiefs?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Buffalo, this is your year. It has to be, I think, personally. Like you said, Steven, we've kind of seen this show before of they're heavy favorites, right? They're number 2 this season, but they're expected to go far. They'd make it, and then Kansas City usually would be the ones to knock them out. So that's just how it's been in recent years, that they'd be great, obviously, in the regular season, and then make it, get past the first round, face KC, either in the championship or in the divisionals, and then that would be it. But this is a really good team. And like you said, Harper, this is a tale of, in a sense, kind of David and Goliath in a way, because I never would have thought that Denver would have made the playoffs this year. I had them ranked either 3rd or 4th in the AFC West, let alone getting out, making a wild card. That was just because there's a new head coach, there's a rookie quarterback, and the talent wasn't anything, to my knowledge at the time, that was worthy of a playoff spot, but they've come together. Denver has, I think, that they've looked really good. Bo Nix has had, honestly, a really solid season. 29 touchdowns through the air, over 3,700 yards. So he's done really solid. But the thing, too, is if their passing game doesn't work, Denver being, then they don't have a stout running game to kind of pick them up, right? Their leading rusher is Javonte Williams, who's only got 513 yards on the season and 4 touchdowns. So they don't have a big running threat like Buffalo has, who has James Cook, who's got 1,000 yards, and of course Josh Allen. He's not afraid to get it done with his legs. Also, more of a bruiser, right? He'll put his shoulder, he'll shoulder check someone if he has to. But both those guys, they've got Cook's got 16 touchdowns, Allen's got 12. So they can get in the end zone. They've got 32 as a unit. Meanwhile, you look at Denver, they only have 12 rushing touchdowns. So that would be a big factor. Josh Allen, we've seen him perform time and time again. Really good player. But where I think Denver, if they want to pull off this upset, and if they want to win this ball game, it's going to be on the defense. Can you shut down Josh Allen, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, et cetera, because this is just an elite defense, guys. They have 63 sacks on the season. Denver does. I mean, they have just some monsters on this team. Nick Benito with 13.5, Jonathan Cooper with 10.5, and Zach Allen with 8.5. So just those 3 alone is scary enough. And then you have a whole crew behind him who also are able to get to the quarterback if need be. So they've got some really good players that can get to the quarterback. Also 15 interceptions on the season. Your leading one being Pat Surtain II, and Brandon Jones right behind him with 3. So it's going to be, if the defense can hold up against Buffalo, I think they have a chance. But for me, I'm going to have to go with Buffalo with this one. I'm with Steven. I think that this should be, if you're Buffalo, I'm not going to say an easy win, but a game that you should win en route to maybe a Super Bowl. And also, this is another factor too, like you said, this is going to be at home in Buffalo. And Buffalo right now, they have not lost a game at home this year. They're perfect 8-0, so they enjoy them some home cooking. So I think the Bills will move forward in this one.
Well, I think another team that really appreciates home cooking, at least for playoffs, is Baltimore. Granted, they were 6-2 throughout the course of the year. But Logan, I'll start with you here. Let's just keep it going. Baltimore at 12-5, ends up taking on Pittsburgh again. This is the third time that they've faced each other, but none more important than this playoff game. Steelers seem to be backing their way into the playoffs, where it looks like Baltimore started out real hot. They get kind of lukewarm in the middle of the season, but it looks like they're hitting on all cylinders. Give me your impressions on this one.
So I'll start off with Baltimore, and like you said, they went through a little bit of tough patch there throughout the season, but they came out looking better, right? And they ended the year on a 4-game winning streak, which is what you want going into the playoffs. You want to build that momentum and just look solid going into these big games here. And meanwhile, like you mentioned, for Pittsburgh, it's the polar opposite. I mean, they went ice cold. They lost 4 straight. So it's just a tough yin and yang for both these teams. Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin, credit to him. I mean, he finished another season above 500 and with 10 wins. So he hit his benchmark once again. So they find a way to win out there in Pittsburgh, but didn't look impressive coming into this game. And obviously with Baltimore, look, we know the offensive weapons of Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry, but I did see that Zay Flowers is not going to be available for this game. He's a little bit nicked up right now. So their top receiver, a guy who's got 1,059 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns, but is their big play threat, right? He gets 62.3 yards a game, averages 14 yards per catch. He is not going to be available. So that means that Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and whoever else wants to step up, this is where you can, make some more money in the offseason, where you can get that pay raise and see what you can do now that their top receiver's out. So I think that's going to be a big key for Baltimore. We know that their defense is good too, 54 sacks on the year. They've also got 12 picks. And, I mean, they got Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Kyle Van Noy, you name Nate Wiggins as well, right? I mean, they've got just a lot of talent on both ends of the ball. And for Pittsburgh, right, talking about Pittsburgh, a team who's hoping that they can look at their past couple of games and fix whatever they need to fix. Because, like I said, this is a team this team you faced before, obviously, same division. So with Pittsburgh, you got Russell Wilson, a guy who, whenever he took over middle of the season, people were kind of scratching their heads and they were looking good, right? And then it's like, all right, yeah, we're rolling now. But then you heard him again, guys. You heard him towards the end of the year saying, oh, all right, well, we're losing a couple of games here. And, oh, Russ, what are you doing? It's looking like you were back at Denver there. But obviously when the playoffs come, we see that Wilson, a guy who has the Super Bowl ring with the Seahawks back when he was there with the Legion of Boom, he can help out teams if need be during these crucial games here. Watch for Najee Harris. He has to have a good performance in this game. And then the receiving core, George Pickens. Look, from Georgia, right? We love George here, but he's got to keep his cool. He's got to keep his cool because half the highlights you see of George Pickens are either one-handed grabs with toe taps or he's wrestling someone on the sideline. So he's got to keep his head in the game or else it might be a quick game there between Baltimore and Pittsburgh. But for me, I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens winning this one. I think Lamar Jackson's had just an outstanding year. Could be on his way to another MVP, but I think just the talent on both ends of the ball, you couple that in the fact they've won 4 straight, Baltimore and Pittsburgh's lost 4 straight. I think that they've just got so much momentum right now that they're going to rush. They're going to look good against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week.
Well, if you're looking at Baltimore right now, Stephen, my concern is how come we're not hearing more about Derrick Henry? He had 1,900 yards. It's not the same as Saquon, but why weren't we looking at him like Sosa and McGuire, where the two of them together are a tandem in terms of the running game, unlike any others. I think Derrick Henry might be the difference of the game, and you're going to see a heavy dose of him if it works. 4, 5, 7 yards a carry. And they're just going to try to thump you into submission. But give us your thoughts, Stephen. I mean, obviously, these teams know each other very well.
Yeah. Or as a famous Keith Jackson would say, two teams that don't like each other very much. So it strikes me. Oh, Nelly. Two teams that have played against each other, and they're not going to invite each other to dinner. There's a lot going on here, and it strikes me this is what the NFL is all about. The NFL loves rivalries, and I'm seeing some really great rivalries going on here. You have your historic interregional rivalries, as mentioned earlier, Minnesota and the Rams with a lot of history, Green Bay and Philadelphia with a lot of history. Then you have this game, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Playing in what's probably going to be cold weather because of this cold weather front that is descending upon the Midwest and the East Coast. And that's a game that Baltimore is built for, especially if they've got some problems in their receiving core. You mentioned Derrick Henry, Heisman Trophy winner out of the University of Alabama. And really, he's emerged as a running back, and to be mentioned, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but a running back to be mentioned in the same breath as somebody like LaDainian Tomlinson, from a previous generation. So between him and Lamar Jackson, they can run the ball and they can control the ball, and that's what's going to give Baltimore the edge. That being said, this is a game that features two of the best coaches. Are these the two best coaches in the National Football League? Now that Belichick is gone, Mike Tomlin and Jack Harbaugh, they're certainly two of the most well-respected. So Tomlin he's going to come up with something, a coach who's faced a team as many times as Pittsburgh has played Baltimore. This is not an old historic rivalry where we're talking about playoff games from the 60s and 70s. These teams battle each other, 2-3 times a year. And so anything can happen when these kind of rivals go after, just like college, it's a rivalry game. So I'm going to favor Baltimore, but the other thing I'm looking at is the coaches, and I'm seeing this wonderful matchup that comes out of this if Baltimore and Harbaugh can pull it out. And then somewhere down the line, do we see the Harbaughs against each other? Because the next game, obviously, we're going to be talking about is the Chargers in Houston, and that's Jim Harbaugh. And Jack Harbaugh has the big edge over his brother. And he's a great coach, but his brother is a great coach as well. So I'm going to favor Baltimore, but Tomlin is a coach who knows what he's up against, and he's going to have some surprises. So I don't think it's going to be a real high-scoring game. I think it's going to be mostly on the ground with the Ravens they've always been defensive-minded. Some of the greatest defensive teams in history have been the Baltimore Ravens. So for that reason, I'm going to give them a slight edge at home.
Yeah, they're tough to beat at home in the playoffs unless their quarterback just lays an egg, which he has done. And they're certainly hoping that the chance of MVP will ring true, especially late in the third or the fourth quarter with a game that has been put away long before. But I wouldn't be surprised. This might be a Timmy Smith type game where in the Super Bowl, Washington Redskins many years ago ended up with a guy that we don't know anything about him before the game and maybe nothing about him after. but some rookie, some receiver, a DB gets a couple of picks. Who knows? But these teams are so familiar with one another that it might take a young upstart player to make a big difference and be the reason that their team ends up winning. But like you, Stephen, and obviously Logan, I'm thinking Baltimore will do quite well. We're favored by 8.5 points, and I'm guessing that's a big number for a playoff game. So evidently that's the way most people feel about this. The last game, which actually is the first game, again, we're going in a reverse order, folks, but the opener, which will be game 6 that we talk about, is Houston ended up hosting the LA Chargers. And you just mentioned Jim Harbaugh a moment ago, Stephen, so I'll start with you. They picked 5th in the draft, just like Denver, just like Washington. Everyone was thinking this is a rebuilding year and it's going to take time and you got to be patient, especially from a defensive front with Jesse Minter, their defensive coordinator. I am just flat out shocked that the LA Chargers are in the position that they are. I'm not saying they were incapable of doing it, but at the beginning of the year, if you said, do you think Harbaugh can do it? I know he's capable of doing it, but not here, not now. It's going to take more time. Boy, was I wrong.
I like the Chargers, and I've liked them all season. I follow them because of Harbaugh. I'm assuming he's finally moved out of Jim Rockford's trailer out in Malibu. But and I like Justin Herbert. I think,
but we don't know if the trailer's still there because of the fires. It may be up in smoke.
Oh gosh, that poor trailer. They probably stuffed 3 families into moving into that thing, and because it's near the ocean, which is where you have to be. The ocean breezes are the only places you can get away from the smog and the smoke. But the Chargers have been in the rearview mirror and in the shadow of the Kansas City Chiefs really for the past couple of seasons. But Jim Harbaugh is their coach, and man, that guy is a winner. He won it at the University of San Diego. He won huge wins at Stanford. He took the 49ers from really kind of a desultory situation to the Super Bowl. And so he's just one of those guys. Just call it competitiveness, call it intuition of the game. The same sort of understanding of football that he had as a quarterback, he is now applying as a coach, which is one of the rare things. Great players who can sort of do that as a coach, like Ted Williams or Jerry West. They had trouble relating to players because they were so much better than they were. Harbaugh was a great player, but not that great. So I think he has the perfect pedigree as a player to translate to a coach. And of course, his brother's a coach, his father's a coach. And this is a situation that he was born for. And so I'm going to favor the Chargers because they're going to get their shot with the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's going to be a tough game. But if there's a team out there that I see as an underdog, like 2007 New York Giants, it might be the Los Angeles Chargers. It just might be. I mean, here's a team that they're in the shadow of everybody. That they were in when they were in San Diego, they were in the shadow of the Raiders, the great Raiders teams over the years. And then they moved to Los Angeles, and of course they're in the shadow of the Rams, who win the Super Bowl. And they're a team that is always under the radar. So this might be the year for the Los Angeles Chargers to never won it all. They've won some AFL titles. They have never won a Super Bowl. And so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is the first shot out of the box towards what could be a Cinderella story.
So you're going to wish them into the Super Bowl, and this time they're going to win it because that's what we want, and doggone it, that's the way it's going to be. And I like the idea behind it. They are a surprise, and I think that how quickly they have turned into a defense first, run first team, more traditional NFL style, and how the players have bought into this. I think that's a key. But do me a favor, Logan. I'm going to ask you to tell me why Stephen is wrong. and more than just doing it from the negative standpoint, I'm going to ask you to say there is a reason behind CJ Stroud and his 3,700 yards, his 20 touchdowns, his 12 interceptions. He was sacked 52 times. I get that. Joe Mixon is a 1,000-yard rusher. Nico Collins is over 1,000 yards receiving. Their defense has 49 sacks. Tell me why I should root for Houston and be glad that I'm doing so.
Well, I think, Harper, you should root for Houston because, I mean, they're also looking for a championship. That they're looking to bring one home since they become the Houston Texans, right? They haven't won one there. So they're looking for that. It's a young team. It's an impressive team. And look, I get that C.J. Stroud, some will say that he's having that sophomore slump, right? And he's not looking as impressive. But, I mean, like you just said, Harper, the man still has an impressive 3,700-plus yards. He's got 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I can see that. And the 52 sacks you can kind of gawk at and say, oh, okay. But let's also not forget the fact, too, that a lot of his players were hurt on offense. Nico Collins only played in 12 games this year. Tank Dell only played in 14 games this year. Stephon Diggs only played in 8 games this year. So their offense has been beat up. We talked about the Lions earlier with how they've been injured, but I mean, my God, the Texans have been getting beat up also in terms of offensive firepower. And C.J. Stroud's kind of been the one consistent person for the most part who's been there week in and week out. Joe Mixon, like you said, a guy who was in Cincinnati, had some good years there, right? He's fit right in. I think he's done a really good job in Houston, filling in and really kind of taking over the reins for that program. And we look at the defense for this team. They have 49 sacks on the year. That's a really solid number right there. And they have 19 interceptions. So they're ball hawks. They have really good players on both sides of the ball. Derek Stingley Jr., as we know, who's done really well. Kamari Lassiter is a great player. Henry To'oTo'o, another guy who he was also hurt this year, right? Only played in 15 games, but he still leads the team in tackles and totals with 105. So, I mean, just an absolute monster out there. So they have a good balanced team on offense, on defense. So I like the Houston Texans, right? And I know that they've been beat up. There's some guys who haven't had as much playing time, but if they can just put a little bit extra tape on their wrist or on their legs, then that could propel them to victory. But talking about the Chargers, though, the one thing that makes me question that if they can win this game, and that's being that both of their key running backs in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are both going to be a little bit banged up coming into this game. They're not ruled out, right? But we're not sure how effective they're going to be because they were listed as questionable earlier in the week. So we'll see if they're going to be fully recovered, if there's still going to be, some nicks and bruises. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play effect. But I think that for Los Angeles, if you look at numbers-wise, yes, Justin Herbert has taken a step back. But like you said, their defense has been so good this year. And their running game also, they're the two guys I had mentioned, that he hasn't needed to throw the ball for 4,000, 5,000 yards. I mean, Justin Herbert's been very impressive this year. I don't hear a whole lot of people talk about it. In terms of he's got 23 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. I mean, that is what you need from a quarterback, someone who can take care of the ball, can throw for a lot of yards. He still has 3,800 yards on the season. And granted, he was sacked 41 times, but I'll still take that any day, bar none. But if LA wants to win this game, you give the ball Ladd McConkey, a guy who they drafted middle rounds this past draft, has been a spark plug for them, right? Their leading receiver, a guy out of Georgia who's looked sharp. And if Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer behind him, if they can make timely catches. That would help out. But you mentioned the main key for Los Angeles is their defense. They have some really good players. Overall, I mean, like we said, we know the big ones, right? Derwin James. You got guys like the veteran Denzel Perryman, of course, Khalil Mack. But I mean, like I said, when Tuli Tuipuloa, he's got 8.5 sacks on the year. You've got Bud Dupree, a veteran. He's got 6. So if Los Angeles can get to C.J. Stroud, which for all we've seen this year, teams can. If their defense can roll, if Justin Herbert can have a good game, that's how LA wins. But if I'm Houston, and like you said, Harper, tying it back, if I'm Houston, why you should root for them? They've got C.J. Stroud, who we've seen time and time again can make big plays, has that nice clutch gene. And I think that Houston, as long as their O-line can hold up and their defense comes to play like we've seen, more times than not, they did finish 10-7. I think that they'll have a very good day. And I do think this is going to be a close ball game, but I will give the Houston Texans taking the win in this one and moving forward with their chances in the playoffs.
Okay, so I unfairly asked you to look at Houston first, but after examining everything, you still think Houston has what it takes to get this.
I'm with you. I do think the Texans can pull it out.
All right. Well, while we were doing the show, I got a text from Vincent, and just a little piece of news, especially here in the Atlanta area. It appears that Georgia quarterback Carson Beck has withdrawn his name from entering into the transfer portal. And it looks like the only reason that I would assume from a business decision why he would do that is if he has either spoken directly with the NCAA and the University of Georgia to see if he can get some additional time. Obviously, he has to heal up from an injury. I don't think that he can throw right now, and I wouldn't want him to if I were his doctor. If he went to see Dr. Andrews or anybody a part of that type of a surgery that's worth their weight in gold, it's about a 9-month recovery time, which would put him into August conditioning and then being able to throw. So we'll see how this transpires. Do you have any other additional news on this, Logan?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look, I was surprised when I saw this news break because obviously you see whenever a guy declares for the draft, you think, all right, well, he had a good run in college, but let's not forget that there's money involved now in college sports. So he's got some suitors, a guy who I feel like if he would have stuck with his plan to go in the draft, would have been middle of the road type pick, because like I said, he's not going to be able to throw the ball till spring. And if he goes back to college, and he's going to have a lot of big suitors, right? He's already going to be the top quarterback in the transfer portal. I mean, just some teams that could go for him. I've seen Texas Tech, Ohio State, and I heard the main one might be down there in South Florida in Miami, because we know Cam Ward's leaving, so they have that gap they need to fill. So they have a lot of teams are going to want this guy. And Carson, credit to him, he did a fine job at Georgia. But, I think that he saw the writing on the wall when Gunner came in, and that's when he initially declared for the draft. But whether it was his doctor, whether it was his agent, or whether it was his parents, whoever it may be, that said, hey, maybe let's rethink this, come back to college, play one more season, and then boost your draft stock and maybe become one of the top quarterbacks in the 2025-26 draft. Maybe that might be better for you personally and financially. So, and a little bit I'm shocked just because I thought he would have maybe entered the transfer portal first instead of going to the draft. But I do think he made the right move here, though, because he'll if he has a good year, he'll return the full strength, hopefully, and look sharp with whatever team he goes to this upcoming season. So, yeah, big news here while we were filming.
Okay, well, we've got that. All right, so we're going to go in the precise order this time, not reverse. And Stephen and Logan, I'm going to ask you a real quick question. If you can only watch one, which would it be? And I know you can only watch one, so I'm going to review for everyone just so we get an idea of what we're looking at over the next 4 or 5 days. We've got football, and more football, but instead of 8 bowl games, we're going to have really 1 or 2 that will be keys. So as soon as I'm done with this, Stephen, I'll ask you directly. Here we go. The Capital One Orange Bowl, and that's tonight. It's going to feature Penn State and Notre Dame. It's a 7:30 kick, reminding you that ESPN will be hosting both of these games tomorrow night, it'll be the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, and that's Texas and Ohio State. That game also at 7:30 on ESPN. On Saturday, you've got AFC playoff games between the LA Chargers. They'll be at the Houston Texans. That's a 4:30 kick on Saturday. CBS will be hosting that game. The late game, which is at 8 o'clock on Saturday, that's on Prime Network. That'll be Pittsburgh going to Baltimore. On Sunday, the first game of the playoffs in the wild card for the 1 o'clock kick will be Denver at Buffalo. Then you've got a 4:30 kick on Fox, and that'll be Green Bay at Philadelphia. The evening game on NBC, which is at normal, but a little bit earlier start. This one will begin at 8 o'clock exactly, probably 8:02 to be precise, is Washington heading to Tampa. And then the game on Monday evening, that's an 8 o'clock kick for that one. That features Minnesota going to the LA Rams, but we're still in cahoots as to whether or not LA will be hosting that, because we've just found out that the LA Lakers will not be hosting their game tonight. I'm not sure if the Clippers or the Kings have any other home games in the next a day or two that will be postponed. The Kings game last night was postponed because of the weather. So here we go back to the initial question. If there's only one that you could watch in a fantasy world, Stephen, which would it be? And then obviously my follow-up will be, which of all of these games sparks the best interest for you?
Well, I look at all these games, and I look at you, Harper, and I look at you, Logan, and I think of Vincent, I think of myself, and we're all, we're fans. We love sports. And I remember when I was a kid and when these weekends would come about and how excited you were when it was the baseball playoffs, or it was the Rose Bowl, or it was Joe Namath in the Super Bowl. And so what an extravaganza of sports. And out there are 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old kids, just like we were once, who are watching these games and loving it. So this is absolutely an incredible situation that you've got football on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That being said, answering your question, the one game I would go for above all, if I am given only one choice, is a real heavyweight matchup, Ohio State at Texas. We'll say it's at Texas. Of the pro games, I'm very interested in Sam Darnold and Minnesota against the Rams on a Monday Night Football situation. But I'm telling you, it's there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of fan bases, and this is what football is all about. So this is why we're doing the show.
All right, Logan, same question to you.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of great football games lined up this week. And, I'm glad that college kind of gets their 2 days to shine, with the game tonight, obviously, and then they kick things off tomorrow night as well. But I'll go with the pro side for this one. Opening round of the NFL playoffs. We're finally made it right through all of these weeks now. It seems like we've just been adding more and more. So I'm excited. We get to see if there's any major upsets that might happen. We get to see the star players, and that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go for the stars. And I'm going to go down to Green Bay. I'm going to go down to Philadelphia, and I'm going to see the Packers, and I'm going to see the Eagles going at it because, yes, it's a 2-7 seed. But when you analyze it, when you look at all the great players on both ends of the ball, you got the great quarterbacks, you got the tremendous running backs, you got the fans involved. The weather's probably not going to be great, so that's just going to make it even better. So I'm going to go with the opening round matchup of Green Bay and Philadelphia for my game.
I thank you both. If you're going to ask me, and no one has, I'm going to take a wild shot.
What would you like to see?
Thank you. The reason I'm going to say Washington versus Tampa is because if the Commanders win, I was so impressed with their win on that Sunday night game against the Falcons about 2 weeks ago. And the roar of the crowd when they ended up moving the ball, getting a first down, there was a different aura behind it. And if they end up winning this sheer joy of these younger guys that are on this team of doing something that nobody expected them to do, I think that type of unbridled enthusiasm will be a must for me. I want to be able to see that again. I don't think that if Buffalo wins, they'll have that same excitement. They've been there before. They deserve to be there before. They don't have that same enthusiasm, at least in my opinion, the joy of that first experience, like what I think the Commanders, if they end up pulling an upset here and winning on the road. So no disrespect to the college games. I will be watching them, and I'm sure you guys will be as well. But I'm just saying, if there was one game in particular that sticks out that I say I may want to do a few things around the house and get them done early so that I have the ability to be able to watch this one without having to do other things around the house, it would be that one. So appreciate it, guys. Any final thoughts? Logan, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of great football this weekend. Looking forward to the game kicking off tonight. The great college matchups. Obviously, like we said, the kickers, right? The college kickers, and seeing if they can make the big kicks in crunch time or not. And obviously, with all the great football we've got lined up this weekend, and Harper Media, we're going to be snowed in, so we got no choice, I think, but to watch these games, right? It's football fans, so that'll be nice to watch. And obviously, the breaking news we had during the show with Carson Beck. Taking his name out of the draft, coming back into college. And I know whoever he goes to, they're going to get a heck of a quarterback, and glad to see him come back for another season. So a lot of great football here as we're getting closer to the playoffs ending in college and just starting up some new ones in the NFL. But a lot of great action coming forward this upcoming weekend.
Yep. And Stephen, you were snowed out about 6 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, about that many. But your snow was 4 feet versus our snow, which is about 3 or 4 inches here in Georgia, which is what we're expecting here in the next 24, 48 hours. But final thoughts for you.
Yeah, and going back to my youth, I was a college baseball player. So January to me was the beginning of college baseball season. And we would always go to a warm weather place like Phoenix or Las Vegas and train in the weather. And what always was happening during this period of time were these playoffs, professional football, and the whole team would crowd around the television and watch these games because we were all pro football fans as well as college baseball players. And I'm sure that's probably going on at various college baseball programs right now. Players of other sports are all fans of football and other sports. And that's really one of the beauties of sports. And so that's what's going on right now. And, it's a kaleidoscope of teams. And just like I was talking about regions, look at the regions. We've got the West, we've got the Midwest, we've got the East, we've got the Deep South, Florida, we've got that sort of mid-regional East, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. What great sports fans and football fans they have in those two cities. We've got, the Harbaugh brothers, sort of hoping to meet each other in the championship game in the AFC, and both are going to have a real struggle to get to that point. But that's what the game is about. It's not an easy game. It's not easy for anybody. And the question again is, will the Chiefs and the Lions benefit from getting the bye? They fight for that bye. They want that bye. The Lions beat the Vikings to get it, but will it help them? Will it be the difference for them? Especially, and look at what we're looking at. Minnesota, if they beat the Rams, it'll be Minnesota and Detroit again. Just like we're seeing Pittsburgh and Baltimore from their division. These two teams don't like each other very much. They play each other all the time. And, now that there's all these games in professional football, they're up to 17 games and there's, it's a deep playoff system. These teams know each other. And that's one of the things about professional football that we're seeing even to some extent in college football, but in professional football, it really makes it interesting that for these defensive coordinators to have to stop a quarterback, a Sam Darnold, a Lamar Jackson, a Justin Herbert, a Jordan Love, a Jared Goff, stop them 2-3 times in a single season. This is the new paradigm of Moneyball and professional football.
Well, it's going to be an amazing weekend, folks, and we hope that you enjoy it as much as we enjoy talking about it. For obvious reasons, you've got the college and you've got the NFL playoffs. What a great time of the year. So January, it gets colder outside, but the TV room should be nice and warm and toasty, and we hope that you guys get to enjoy the action. So starting on Thursday all the way through Monday, you've got back-to-back-to-back football games, and we've enjoyed talking about them here today. So for Vincent Turner, our founder, who is not able to be with us today, but it's still his show, so we want to make sure we honor him. For Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for Stephen Travers, this is Take 5 with Stephen Travers. We appreciate everybody being a part of the show here today. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope everybody enjoys this wonderful weekend of football, and have a great and fantastic rest of your day.